What happens when a man's dedication to his craft becomes the key to changing his entire life? Tonight, we share the remarkable story of Matthew Coleman, a 52-year-old aircraft mechanic at Westmont Regional Airport in Kansas, who was working double shifts to support his two teenagers when a storm-delayed private jet arrived with a critical engine failure that no one else could fix. What Matthew didn't know was that the mysterious passenger aboard that aircraft was Elizabeth Thornton, a billionaire technology CEO traveling under an assumed name, who would witness his extraordinary skill and unwavering commitment to excellence. When Matthew collapsed from exhaustion after completing the most challenging repair of his career, he had no idea that this moment of vulnerability would become the catalyst for the most extraordinary opportunity of his lifetime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's harsh buzzer cut through the pre-dawn darkness of the small apartment at 4:30 a.m. Matthew Coleman's weathered hand reached out from under the thin blanket, fumbling to silence the noise before it could wake his children. His body protested as he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, every muscle aching from another 16-hour day at Westmont Regional Airport. The digital display on the clock seemed to mock him with its red numbers, reminding him that he'd managed only 3 hours of sleep again. Matthew sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, running calloused hands through his graying hair. The small bedroom felt even smaller in the darkness, cramped with the basic furniture he'd managed to keep after the medical bills had forced them to downsize. Through the thin walls, he could hear the neighbor's television playing some late-night movie. The muffled sound, a constant reminder of how little privacy their current living situation afforded. "Just get through today," he whispered to himself. The same mantra he'd been repeating for the past 2 years since Grace had passed. The funeral expenses, combined with the crushing medical debt from her cancer treatment, had transformed their comfortable middle-class life into a daily struggle for survival. The bathroom mirror reflected a man who looked older than his 52 years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the stress lines around his mouth seemed to deepen with each passing week. Matthew splashed cold water on his face, trying to wash away the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. His work uniform hung on the bathroom door, the blue coveralls bearing the Westmont Regional Airport logo, freshly washed, but showing the wear of countless hours spent crawling around aircraft engines. In the kitchen, Matthew quietly prepared his usual breakfast of instant coffee and toast, careful not to wake Hannah and Marcus Jr. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a concerning sound that meant another appliance was on the verge of breaking down. He made a mental note to check it later, adding it to the growing list of things that needed attention but would have to wait until he could afford to fix them. A note stuck to the refrigerator door caught his attention, written in Hannah's careful handwriting. "Dad, don't forget about the parent-teacher conference Thursday. Also, Marcus needs new basketball shoes. His coach says the ones he has are unsafe. Love you." Matthew's heart sank as he calculated the cost of new athletic shoes against their already stretched budget. Hannah's senior year expenses were mounting, and Marcus Jr.'s growing feet seemed to outpace their ability to keep up with his needs. The parent-teacher conference would likely bring more requests for things they couldn't afford: college application fees, graduation expenses, class ring payments. His phone buzzed with a text message from Veronica Gutierrez, his supervisor at the airport. "Matt, can you come in early today? We've got a commercial jet with hydraulic issues that came in overnight. Customer is pushing for a quick turnaround." Matthew typed back quickly, "On my way in 20 minutes." The extra hours meant additional overtime pay, money they desperately needed. Every emergency call, every weekend shift, every holiday worked was another small step toward financial stability. Matthew had been averaging 70-hour weeks for the past 6 months, taking on every available assignment to make ends meet. He grabbed his thermos of coffee and headed for the door, pausing to look back at the small apartment that had become their world. Family photos lined the hallway, reminders of better times when Grace was alive, and their biggest worry was whether to take a vacation to the mountains or the beach. Now, their biggest worry was whether the rent would be covered each month. The drive to Westmont Regional Airport took 25 minutes through the quiet Kansas streets. Dawn was beginning to break over the flat horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and orange hues that reminded Matthew of Grace's watercolor paintings. She used to wake early to capture the sunrise, claiming that the morning light held possibilities that the rest of the day couldn't match. Westmont Regional Airport sprawled across several hundred acres of prairie land, serving both commercial and private aircraft. The main terminal building stood against the morning sky, its control tower blinking with navigation lights. Hangars dotted the landscape like massive metal barns, each one housing aircraft worth millions of dollars. For Matthew, this place had become both sanctuary and prison, a place where his skills were valued, but his time was consumed entirely. The maintenance facility hummed with activity even at this early hour. Aircraft don't adhere to normal business schedules, and neither do the people who keep them flying. Matthew badged into the building, the familiar smell of jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, and metal polish greeting him like an old friend. The concrete floors echoed with the sounds of air compressors, power tools, and the constant chatter of technicians coordinating repairs. "Morning, Matt," called Austin Reed, a younger mechanic who had been working at the facility for about 3 years. Austin was 29, single, and still had the energy that comes with not having the weight of family responsibilities. "Veronica's looking for you. That hydraulic job turned into something bigger." Matthew nodded, clocking in at the time station and grabbing his toolbox from his assigned locker. The metal box had been his companion for over 25 years, its drawers organized with the precision that comes from thousands of hours of experience. Each tool had its place, each instrument carefully maintained and ready for whatever challenge the day might bring. Veronica Gutierrez emerged from the supervisor's office, her expression mixing relief and concern. At 48, she had been managing the maintenance department for 8 years, and she knew that Matthew was her most reliable technician. She also knew he was pushing himself beyond sustainable limits. "Matt, thanks for coming in early. We've got a situation with that bombardier that came in last night. The hydraulic leak is worse than initially reported, and there are some electrical issues that seem related. The owner is some business executive who needs to be in Denver by noon." "What's the timeline looking like?" Matthew asked, already mentally cataloging the potential problems and solutions. "If we can get it diagnosed and repaired by 10, they can still make their meeting. The pilot seems competent, but he's concerned about the electrical issues. Says there were some instrument warnings during landing that he's never seen before." Matthew followed Veronica across the hangar floor toward the private jet in question. The Bombardier Global 6000 sat elegantly in the maintenance bay, its white fuselage gleaming under the fluorescent lights. These aircraft represented the pinnacle of private aviation, worth upward of $60 million and equipped with technology that rivaled commercial airliners. "The passenger seems nice enough," Veronica continued as they walked. "Older woman traveling alone. She's waiting in the executive lounge, pretty understanding about the delay. Goes by the name Beth Thomas, says she's in consulting." Matthew nodded absently, his attention already focused on the aircraft. The Bombardier's engine cowlings were open, revealing the complex turbofan engines that powered the jet. Hydraulic fluid stained the hangar floor beneath the left engine, indicating a leak that could range from minor seepage to major system failure. "Austin's been doing the initial inspection," Veronica explained, "but you know how these high-end, Aircraft can be. Sometimes what looks like a simple leak turns into a complete system overhaul. As they approached the aircraft, Matthew could see Austin Reed underneath the left wing, flashlight in hand, tracing hydraulic lines through the maze of components. The young mechanic's expression was one of concentration, mixed with frustration, a look Matthew recognized from his own early years in aviation maintenance. "What have you got, Austin?" Matthew called out, setting his toolbox down and pulling on work gloves. Austin slid out from under the wing, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "It's not just a simple leak, Matt. The hydraulic reservoir is down about 40%, but I can't find where all that fluid went. There's evidence of leakage around the main pump, but not enough to account for what's missing." Matthew crouched down to examine the area Austin had been investigating. His trained eye immediately picked up details that experience had taught him to recognize. The pattern of fluid residue, the color and consistency of the leaked hydraulic fluid, the way certain components showed signs of stress or wear. "Hand me that inspection mirror," Matthew said, extending his hand without looking away from the aircraft. Austin quickly provided the tool, a small mirror on an adjustable handle that allowed mechanics to see into tight spaces. Using the mirror, Matthew peered into areas that couldn't be seen directly. Years of experience had taught him that aircraft systems were interconnected in ways that weren't always obvious. A hydraulic leak could be related to electrical problems, structural stress, or even environmental factors like extreme temperature changes. "There," Matthew said quietly, pointing to a spot deep within the engine compartment. "See that discoloration? On the electrical harness, that's not just hydraulic fluid, that's evidence of electrical arcing." Austin leaned in to look where Matthew was pointing. "I don't see it. Right there, where the main electrical bundle passes near the hydraulic manifold. See how the insulation looks melted in that one spot? That's what happens when hydraulic fluid gets onto high-voltage electrical connections." The implications of Matthew's observation were significant. This wasn't just a maintenance issue, it was a potential safety hazard that could affect multiple aircraft systems. Hydraulic fluid on electrical connections could cause short circuits, system failures, or even electrical fires. Veronica had been listening to their conversation, and her expression grew more serious. "How long to fix something like that?" Matthew stood up, his knees protesting after crouching for several minutes. "Depends on how extensive the damage is. Could be a few hours if we're lucky. Could be most of the day if we need to replace major components. I'll need to do a complete system check before I know for sure." The morning was already slipping away, and Matthew knew that his day was about to become much longer than originally planned. But as he looked at the sophisticated aircraft in front of him, he felt the familiar surge of professional pride that came with tackling complex technical challenges. This was what he did best, and despite the exhaustion and financial pressure, he was good at it. "Let's get started," Matthew said, reaching for his diagnostic equipment. "This is going to be interesting." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Matthew spent the next 2 hours methodically tracing the electrical and hydraulic systems throughout the Bombardier's engine compartment. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward leak had evolved into a complex diagnostic puzzle that challenged even his decades of experience. The electrical harness damage extended further than he'd first realized, with multiple connection points showing signs of contamination and potential failure. "Veronica, I need you to see this," Matthew called from beneath the aircraft's wing. His supervisor approached, crouching down to peer into the cramped space where Matthew was working. "The hydraulic leak started here," Matthew explained, pointing to a fitting deep within the engine bay. "But the real problem is that this aircraft has been flying with this leak for weeks, maybe months. The hydraulic fluid has been misting onto The electrical systems every time the pumps engage during flight operations. Veronica's expression grew grave as she understood the implications. That means potential system failures could happen during critical flight phases. Exactly. Takeoff, landing, anytime the hydraulic systems are under maximum load, the electrical contamination could cause multiple system failures simultaneously. Matthew's voice carried the weight of someone who understood that aircraft maintenance wasn't just about fixing problems, but about preventing catastrophes. Austin Reed had been listening to their conversation while organizing tools nearby. At 29, he was still learning the intricacies of aviation maintenance, and moments like these provided invaluable education about the complexity of aircraft systems. "How do we fix something like this?" Austin asked, genuinely curious. About the repair process, Matthew carefully extracted himself from under the wing, his back aching from the awkward position. "First, we need to completely drain and flush the hydraulic system. Then we replace every contaminated electrical connection, test all related circuits, and rebuild the hydraulic manifold assembly. It's not difficult work, but it's time-consuming and requires absolute precision." The clock on the hangar wall showed 8:45 a.m., and Matthew calculated the hours needed for proper repairs. The passenger's noon deadline was becoming increasingly unrealistic, but rushing aircraft maintenance was never an option. Safety protocols existed for good reasons, written in regulations that had been developed through decades of aviation experience. And unfortunately, accidents. "I'll call the executive lounge and explain the situation," Veronica said. "Most experienced travelers understand that aircraft maintenance can't be rushed." As Veronica walked toward the office to make the call, Matthew began gathering the tools and parts he would need for the repair. The hangar's parts inventory contained most standard components, but some specialized electrical connectors might need to be ordered from suppliers. He hoped they had everything necessary to complete the job without delays. Austin approached with a parts manifest, checking items off as they gathered materials. "Matt, I've been watching how you diagnose these problems. How do you know where to look first?" "Experience, mostly," Matthew replied, selecting specialized electrical tools from his toolbox, "but also understanding how systems interact with each other. Aircraft aren't just collections of individual components. Everything affects everything else. When you see a hydraulic leak, you have to consider what else might be affected by that leak." The teaching moment reminded Matthew of his early days in aviation maintenance, when Vincent Ramirez had been his mentor. Vincent had taught him that being a good mechanic meant thinking beyond the immediate problem to understand the broader implications of any system failure. "In this case," Matthew continued, "hydraulic fluid is designed to operate under extreme pressure and temperature. When it leaks onto electrical systems, it doesn't just create a mess. It can conduct electricity, causing short circuits. It can also break down insulation materials, leading to long-term electrical problems." As they worked, the morning progressed. With the steady rhythm of methodical repair procedures, Matthew's hands moved with practiced efficiency, each action deliberate and precise. Draining the hydraulic system required careful attention to environmental regulations, ensuring that no fluids were spilled or improperly disposed of. Around 10:30 a.m., Veronica returned from the office with an update. "I spoke with the passenger. She's very understanding about the delay, says safety is more important than schedules, and she'd rather have the aircraft properly repaired than rush the job." "Smart woman," Matthew commented, carefully inspecting an electrical connector under a magnifying lamp. Most people in private aviation understand the stakes involved. She asked if she could observe the repair process, says she's curious about aircraft maintenance. I told her it would be fine as long as she stays clear of the work area and wears safety equipment. Matthew nodded absently, his attention focused on the delicate work of replacing contaminated electrical connections. Each connector had to be cleaned, inspected, and properly torqued to manufacturer specifications. The repair manual lay open beside him, its pages marked with notes from previous similar repairs. A few minutes later, a woman in her mid-40s approached the work area. She wore casual but expensive-looking clothes and carried herself with quiet confidence. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she observed the maintenance operation with genuine interest rather than impatience. "I'm Beth Thomas," she said, introducing herself to Matthew. "I understand you're the mechanic working on my aircraft." Matthew looked up from his work, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Matthew Coleman. Sorry about the delay, but we found some issues that need proper attention before this aircraft is safe to fly." "Please don't apologize. I appreciate thorough work. May I ask what the problem is?" Matthew was struck by her genuine interest in the technical details. Most passengers wanted to know when the aircraft would be ready, not how the repairs were being performed. He explained the hydraulic leak and electrical contamination in terms that a non-technical person could understand. "So this could have caused problems during flight?" Beth asked. "Potentially, yes. Hydraulic systems control critical flight functions like landing gear, flight controls, and braking systems. Electrical problems could affect navigation, communications, or engine management systems. It's better to fix everything properly on the ground than to deal with emergencies in the air." Beth nodded thoughtfully. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" 26 years in aviation maintenance. Started right out of high school, worked my way up through different types of aircraft. Matthew returned his attention to the electrical connection he was installing, but continued the conversation as he worked. "It must be satisfying work, knowing that people's safety depends on your expertise." "It is," Matthew agreed, "though it can be stressful too. There's no margin for error in aviation maintenance. Everything has to be done right the first time." Austin Reed had been listening to their conversation while organizing tools nearby. He was impressed by how patiently Matthew explained technical concepts to the passenger, taking time he didn't really have to ensure she understood the importance of proper maintenance procedures. "Matt's one of the best mechanics in this region," Austin added. "He's saved our department on dozens of complicated repairs. Management calls him in whenever there's a problem nobody else can solve." Matthew felt slightly uncomfortable with the praise, but Beth Thomas seemed genuinely interested in their work. She asked thoughtful questions about maintenance schedules, regulatory requirements, and the training necessary to become certified for aircraft maintenance. "Do you work exclusively on private aircraft?" she asked. "No, we service everything that comes through Westmont Regional. Commercial airliners, private jets, cargo planes, even some military aircraft when they need facilities. Each type has its own challenges and requirements." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Benjamin Ward, the pilot who would be flying the Bombardier once repairs were completed. Captain Ward was a seasoned aviator in his 50s, with the calm demeanor that comes from decades of professional flight experience. "How are we looking, Matthew?" Captain Ward asked, reviewing the maintenance logbook where all work was being documented. "Making good progress. I should have everything buttoned up within the next 2 hours. The hydraulic system is clean and refilled, and I'm finishing the electrical connections now. I'll need to run a complete system check before I sign off on the work." "Take your time. I'd rather be late than have problems at altitude." Captain Ward turned to Beth Thomas. "Ma'am, I know this delay is inconvenient, but Matthew's reputation for thorough work is why I recommended this facility for the repair." "I'm learning a great deal watching the process," Beth replied. "It's fascinating to see the level of detail and precision required." As the morning progressed toward noon, Matthew's fatigue began to show more clearly. He had been working for 8 Hours straight after only 3 hours of sleep, and the complex nature of the repairs demanded sustained concentration. His movements remained precise, but Austin noticed that he was taking longer breaks and occasionally pausing to rest his eyes. "Matt, you want me to take over for a while?" Austin offered. "You've been going non-stop since early this morning." "I'm fine," Matthew replied automatically, though his voice carried a weariness that suggested otherwise. "Just need to finish these last few connections and run the system tests." Beth Thomas had been observing Matthew's work for over an hour, and she noticed the signs of exhaustion that he was trying to hide. The careful precision of his movements, the way he double-checked every connection, the obvious pride he took in his work despite being clearly tired. "Mr. Coleman, when was the last time you took a proper break?" she asked with concern. Matthew paused in his work, realizing that he couldn't remember his last real day off. "I work most days. My family needs the income, so I take whatever shifts are available. That must be difficult, maintaining this level of concentration when you're working so many hours." "You do what you have to do," Matthew said simply, returning to his work on the electrical connections. The conversation revealed more about Matthew's situation than he usually shared with customers. Something about Beth Thomas's genuine interest and non-judgmental questions made him feel comfortable discussing the realities of his life. Most passengers viewed maintenance personnel as invisible service providers, but she seemed to see him as a person with expertise and challenges. As Matthew began the final system checks, the afternoon sun streamed through the hangar's large windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The Bombardier's engines would need to be started and tested, hydraulic systems cycled through their full range of operations, and all electrical systems verified as functioning properly. "This is the critical part," Matthew explained to Beth as she continued to observe. "All the repair work is meaningless if the systems don't function correctly when tested under actual operating conditions. The testing process would take another hour, but it was essential to ensure that the aircraft was safe for flight." Matthew's reputation and professional certification depended on the quality of his work, and more importantly, the lives of everyone who would fly in the aircraft depended on his thoroughness. As he prepared to begin the final testing sequence, Matthew felt the familiar satisfaction that came with solving complex technical problems. Despite his exhaustion and the long hours, he was good at this work, and he knew it. What he didn't know was that his dedication and expertise were being carefully observed by someone who had the power to change his entire future. The final testing phase required Matthew to power up the Bombardier's engines while monitoring dozens of gauges, readouts, and system indicators. He climbed into the cockpit, his tired body settling into the pilot's seat as he began the systematic process of bringing the aircraft systems online. The cockpit's sophisticated instrument panel came alive with digital displays and warning lights that would indicate any problems with the repairs he had just completed. "Austin, I need you on the ground monitoring the engine bay," Matthew called through the cockpit window. "Watch for any signs of leakage, unusual sounds, or visual abnormalities during the engine start sequence." Austin positioned himself near the left engine with a fire extinguisher and radio, standard safety protocol during maintenance engine runs. Beth Thomas stood at a safe distance, her attention focused intently on the testing procedure. Captain Ward reviewed the maintenance documentation while staying ready to assist if needed. The first engine started smoothly, its turbofan spinning, up to idle speed with the distinctive whistle that characterizes modern jet engines. Matthew carefully monitored the hydraulic pressure readings, electrical system status, and engine parameters displayed on the multifunction screens before him. Each gauge told part of the story about how well his repairs had addressed the original problems. "Engine 1 looking good," Austin reported over the radio. "No visible leaks, normal exhaust signature, all external indicators appear normal." Matthew nodded and initiated the start sequence for the second engine. The startup procedure for each engine took several minutes, during which dozens of automatic systems checks verified that everything was functioning within acceptable parameters. His experienced eye caught subtle variations in readings that might indicate developing problems, but so far everything appeared normal. With both engines running at idle, Matthew began cycling through the hydraulic system tests. Landing gear, retraction and extension, flight control surface movements, brake system pressure checks. Each test stressed different components of the systems he had repaired, verifying that the work could withstand the demands of actual flight operations. Hydraulic system responding normally, Matthew announced. Pressure holding steady, no fluctuations during load cycling. The electrical system tests came next, more complex procedures that verified the integrity of every connection Matthew had. Cleaned and replaced navigation systems, communication radios, engine management computers, flight control systems. The aircraft's sophisticated electronics had to coordinate seamlessly for safe flight operations. As Matthew worked through the systematic testing procedures, his exhaustion began manifesting in subtle ways. His movements were still precise, but slightly slower than usual. He found himself double-checking readings he would normally trust immediately. The concentration required for complex testing procedures was demanding more effort than it should have. "Matt, all readings look good from where I'm standing," Austin called over the radio. "Everything seems to be responding normally to your inputs. Copy that. Running the final electrical load tests now." Matthew's voice carried the fatigue he was trying to suppress, but his professional discipline kept him focused on completing every required procedure. Beth Thomas watched the testing process with fascination, impressed by the thoroughness and systematic approach Matthew employed. She had observed many professionals in various industries, but rarely had she seen someone who combined technical expertise with such obvious dedication to doing the job correctly, regardless of personal cost. The electrical load tests required Matthew to activate multiple systems simultaneously, creating the kind of power demands the aircraft would experience during normal flight operations. Cabin pressurization, environmental controls, navigation systems, communications equipment, all drawing power while the engines provided electrical generation. "Electrical systems stable under full load," Matthew reported. "All voltages within normal parameters, no fluctuations or anomalies detected." Captain Ward approached the cockpit window. "Matthew, everything looks excellent from my perspective. The maintenance documentation shows you've addressed all the original problems plus several others that could have become serious issues. This is exactly the kind of thorough work that keeps aircraft safe." The praise felt good, but Matthew was too tired to fully appreciate it. He had been working for nearly 10 hours with minimal breaks, most of that time spent in physically demanding positions or requiring intense concentration. His body was sending clear signals that it needed rest, but he pushed through to complete the final testing requirements. "One more test sequence," Matthew said, initiating the flight control system check. This procedure moved all the aircraft's control surfaces through their full range of motion, while monitoring the electrical and hydraulic systems that powered them. Ailerons, elevators, rudder, spoilers, trim tabs. Each surface had to move smoothly and respond correctly to cockpit inputs. As the control surfaces cycled through their movements, Matthew monitored the cockpit displays that showed system status and control positions. The repairs appeared to be completely successful, with all systems functioning normally under the kind of loads they would experience during actual flight. "Control surfaces responding normally," he announced. "Full deflection. In all directions, no binding or hesitation, hydraulic pressure maintaining properly throughout the cycle." Beth Thomas had been observing for over 3 hours now, and she couldn't help but notice how Matthew's professionalism never wavered, despite his obvious fatigue. His commitment to completing every required test, his patience in explaining procedures. To Austin, his thorough documentation of all work performed. "Mr. Coleman," she said during a brief pause in the testing, "how often do you encounter problems this complex?" Matthew looked up from the instrument panel, grateful for a moment to rest his eyes. "Complex problems are fairly common in aviation. Maintenance. Aircraft operate in demanding environments, and systems interact in ways that can create unexpected issues. The key is understanding how everything works together." "And you've developed that understanding over 26 years? Experience helps, but you also have to keep learning. Aircraft technology evolves constantly, new systems are introduced, regulations change. Staying current requires ongoing education and training." Austin Reed had been listening to their conversation while monitoring the external systems. He was struck by how Matthew continued teaching and sharing knowledge, even when clearly exhausted. Most people in his condition would focus solely on completing the immediate task. "Matt's always sharing what he knows," Austin interjected. "He's taught me more about complex diagnostics in the past year than I learned in my formal training programs." The comment reminded Matthew of Vincent Ramirez, his own mentor, who had invested time and patience in developing Matthew's skills during his early career. Passing knowledge to the next generation of mechanics was part of the unwritten responsibilities that came with experience and expertise. "Knowledge is only valuable if it's shared," Matthew said simply. "Austin's got good instincts and strong technical skills. He just needs exposure to more complex problems to develop his diagnostic abilities." The final test sequence involved running both engines at higher power settings while monitoring all systems under increased stress. This was the most demanding part of the testing process, requiring Matthew to manage multiple controls simultaneously while watching for any signs of problems. As the engines spooled up to higher power settings, the noise level in the hangar increased dramatically. The distinctive sound of turbofan engines under load filled the space, a deep rumbling punctuated by the high-pitched whine of compressor stages operating at maximum efficiency. Matthew's hands moved across the cockpit controls with practiced precision, adjusting power settings while monitoring dozens of gauges and indicators. Engine temperatures, pressures, vibration levels, electrical outputs, hydraulic flows. Any abnormal reading could indicate a problem that would require additional repairs. "Engine parameters all normal," he reported over the increased noise. "Hydraulic systems maintaining pressure under high load conditions. Electrical generation stable across all power settings." The high-power testing continued for 15 minutes, stressing every system Matthew had repaired while verifying that the aircraft could safely handle the demands of normal flight operations. His concentration never wavered, but the physical and mental strain of maintaining such focused attention was becoming increasingly difficult. Beth Thomas noticed that Matthew was gripping the controls more tightly than seemed necessary, his knuckles showing white with tension. She could see the effort it was taking him to maintain the precise control inputs required for the testing procedures. "How much longer for the testing?" she asked Captain Ward quietly. "He's almost finished. Just needs to complete the high-power checks and then shut everything down. Maybe 10 more minutes." As Matthew began the engine shutdown procedures, carefully following the prescribed sequence to avoid damaging the sophisticated turbofan engines, he felt a wave of satisfaction mixed with relief. The repairs had been completely successful, and the aircraft was now safe for flight operations. "All tests completed successfully," he announced as the engines wound down to silence. "Aircraft is ready for flight operations. All discrepancies have been corrected and all systems are functioning normally." Austin Reed approached the cockpit as Matthew began gathering his testing equipment. "Matt, that was incredible work. I learned more watching this repair than I have in months of routine maintenance." "Glad I could help," Matthew replied. climbing. Down from the cockpit, with movements that showed his exhaustion more clearly now that the critical work was finished. The important thing is that the aircraft is safe. That's what matters most. Captain Ward shook Matthew's hand firmly. Outstanding work as always. I'll make sure this gets documented properly in our maintenance records. This kind of thorough repair work is exactly why we bring aircraft here. As Matthew began the process of cleaning up his tools and completing the required paperwork, he felt the familiar satisfaction that came with solving complex technical problems. But underneath that satisfaction was a bone-deep weariness that he could no longer ignore. His body was telling him in no uncertain terms that he had pushed too hard for too long. Beth Thomas approached him as he packed his tools. "Mr. Coleman, I want to thank you for explaining the repair process and for the obvious care you took with the work. It's clear that this aircraft is in better condition now than when it arrived." "Just doing my job," Matthew replied, though he appreciated her genuine gratitude. "Safe travels, and I hope the rest of your trip goes smoothly." What Matthew didn't realize was that Beth Thomas had been evaluating much more than just his technical skills during the long repair process. She had observed his work ethic, his teaching ability, his commitment to safety, and his obvious expertise in solving complex problems. She had also noticed his exhaustion and the personal challenges that drove him to work such demanding schedules. As the late afternoon sun slanted through the hangar windows, casting long shadows across the maintenance area, Matthew began the final documentation of his work. But the combination of extreme fatigue, sustained stress, and the physical demands of 10 hours of intensive labor was about to catch up with him in ways he never expected. The paperwork required after completing major aircraft repairs was extensive and critical. Matthew sat at a small desk in the maintenance office, filling out Federal Aviation Administration forms that documented every aspect of the work performed. Each repaired component, every test conducted, all parts replaced, and the technician certifications authorizing the aircraft's return to service. His handwriting, normally neat and precise, showed slight tremors from exhaustion. "Aircraft maintenance record entry," Matthew wrote carefully. "Hydraulic system leak corrected. Electrical harness contamination repaired. All affected components cleaned, tested and certified airworthy. Systems check completed satisfactorily. Aircraft approved for return to service." The documentation process required Matthew to reference technical manuals, parts catalogs, and regulatory requirements to ensure complete accuracy. Any error in the paperwork could ground the aircraft or create legal liability for the maintenance facility. Despite his fatigue, Matthew's professional training kept him focused on getting every detail correct. Beth Thomas had remained in the hangar area, ostensibly waiting for the final paperwork to be completed before departure. In reality, she was continuing to observe Matthew's work habits and professional standards. She watched him methodically complete each form, double-checking entries against his notes and the aircraft's maintenance logbook. "Veronica, could you review these entries before I sign off?" Matthew called to his supervisor, following standard procedure for major repairs. All significant maintenance work required supervisory review and counter-signature to ensure quality control and regulatory compliance. Veronica Gutierrez approached the desk, reviewing Matthew's documentation with the practiced eye of someone who had overseen thousands of aircraft maintenance operations. She checked that all required fields were completed, that the work descriptions matched the actual repairs performed, and that all regulatory requirements had been met. "Everything looks complete and accurate," Veronica confirmed. "Your work on this aircraft was exceptional, Matt. The customer is getting a lot more value than they paid for." As Matthew signed his technician certification on the final form, his Han paused momentarily. The signature that authorized the aircraft's return to service represented more than paperwork. It was his professional guarantee that the work had been performed correctly and that the aircraft was safe for flight operations. Austin. Reed had been organizing tools and cleaning the work area while Matthew completed the documentation. He noticed that Matthew was taking longer than usual to complete routine paperwork tasks and that his normally steady hands showed slight shakiness when handling the forms. "Matt, you've been going for over 10 hours straight," Austin said with concern. "Maybe you should take a break before finishing up here." "Almost done," Matthew replied, though his voice carried a weariness that suggested he was running on determination alone. "Just need to complete the logbook entries and get everything filed properly." The aircraft logbook required detailed entries describing the maintenance performed, parts installed, and testing completed. These permanent records would travel with the aircraft throughout its operational life, providing future maintenance. Technicians with critical information about repairs and modifications. Matthew's entries needed to be clear, complete, and technically accurate. As he wrote the final logbook entry, Matthew felt a strange lightness in his head, as if the hangar around him was becoming less substantial. He attributed the sensation to fatigue and continued working, determined to complete all required documentation before acknowledging his exhaustion. Beth Thomas noticed Matthew's increasingly pale complexion and the way he occasionally paused to steady himself against the desk. Her concern was growing, but she hesitated to interfere with procedures she didn't fully understand. She had observed enough to recognize that Matthew was pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "are you feeling all right? You look like you might need to rest." Matthew looked up from the logbook, trying to focus on her face. The fluorescent lights in the maintenance office seemed unusually bright, and he was having difficulty concentrating on the words he was writing. "I'm fine, just tired. Long day, but I've had longer." The statement wasn't entirely truthful. Matthew had worked many long days, but rarely under such intense pressure and complex technical demands. The combination of physical exertion, mental concentration, and emotional stress was taking a toll that his body could no longer accommodate. Captain Ward entered the maintenance office to collect the completed paperwork and conduct the final aircraft acceptance inspection. This was standard procedure before any aircraft was released back to service after major maintenance work. "Matthew, I want to personally thank you for the outstanding work on this aircraft," Captain Ward said. "The thoroughness of your repairs and testing gives me complete confidence in the aircraft's airworthiness. Thank you, Captain. The aircraft is in excellent condition now. All systems are functioning properly and documented correctly." Matthew's words were professional and accurate, but his voice carried a strain that suggested he was fighting to maintain composure. As Matthew stood up from the desk to hand over the completed paperwork, the combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and sustained stress finally overwhelmed his body's ability to compensate. The hangar around him seemed to tilt sideways, and his vision began to narrow into a dark tunnel. "I think I need to..." Matthew began, but never finished the sentence. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the concrete floor of the maintenance office, the completed paperwork scattering around him. Austin Reed reacted immediately, dropping to his knees beside Matthew and checking for signs of consciousness. "Matt, can you hear me?" He looked up at the others in the office. "Someone call the paramedics." Beth Thomas moved quickly to Matthew's side, her demeanor shifting from interested observer to someone taking charge of an emergency situation. "Don't move him until we know what's wrong. Is he breathing normally?" "Breathing is steady. Pulse is rapid but strong," Austin reported, his first aid training from the military serving him well in the crisis. "He's unconscious, but his vital signs seem stable." Veronica Gutierrez was already on the phone with emergency services, providing clear information about the situation and location. We need paramedics at Westmont Regional Airport, Hangar 7. We have a 52-year-old male who collapsed, unconscious, breathing normally. We're at the maintenance facility. Captain Ward helped clear the area around Matthew, moving chairs and equipment to give him space and ensure the paramedics would have room to work when they arrived. His aviation training included emergency response procedures, and he knew the importance of maintaining calm during crisis situations. Beth Thomas knelt beside Matthew, observing his condition with the careful attention of someone who had dealt with medical emergencies before. She noticed that his color was improving slightly now that he was lying down, and his breathing seemed to be becoming more regular. "How long has he been working today?" she asked Austin. "He came in early this morning, around 5 o'clock. He's been working continuously for about 11 hours, most of it involving complex technical work under pressure." Beth's expression grew more concerned as she understood the extent of Matthew's exhaustion. She had observed his dedication and professionalism throughout the day, but hadn't fully realized how long he had been pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. The sound of sirens approached the airport, growing louder as the emergency vehicles navigated through the facility toward the maintenance hangar. Within minutes, paramedics entered the office with medical equipment and began their assessment of Matthew's condition. "Sir, can you hear me?" the lead paramedic called, checking Matthew's pupils with a small flashlight. "What's his name?" "Matthew Coleman," Austin provided. "He's been working for 11 hours straight, very demanding technical work. He collapsed while completing paperwork." The paramedics began a systematic evaluation of Matthew's vital signs, checking blood pressure, heart rate, and blood sugar levels. Their professional calm helped reduce the tension in the room as they worked through established protocols for assessing unconscious patients. "Blood pressure is elevated. Heart rate is rapid. Blood sugar is low," the paramedic reported to his partner. "Looks like exhaustion complicated by dehydration and probably inadequate nutrition. Let's get an IV started and transport him for evaluation." Beth Thomas watched the paramedics work with practiced efficiency, impressed by their professional competence but troubled by the circumstances that had led to Matthew's collapse. She had spent the day observing a man who clearly took pride in his work and maintained the highest professional standards, despite personal challenges. "Is he going to be okay?" Austin asked, his concern evident in his voice. "His vital signs are stabilizing," the paramedic replied, while preparing an intravenous line. "This looks like severe exhaustion rather than anything more serious, but we need to get him to the hospital for proper evaluation and treatment." As the paramedics prepared to transport Matthew to the hospital, he began to regain consciousness, though he remained disoriented and weak. His first words were characteristic of his dedication to his work. "Did I finish the paperwork?" he asked groggily, trying to sit up despite the paramedics' efforts to keep him lying down. "The paperwork is complete," Austin assured him. "Everything is properly documented and filed. You don't need to worry about anything right now." Beth Thomas leaned closer to Matthew as the paramedics prepared the gurney for transport. "Mr. Coleman, you're going to the hospital for evaluation. Is there someone we should call? Family members who should know what's happened?" Matthew's thoughts turned immediately to his children, and the worry that crossed his face was evident to everyone present. "My daughter Hannah and my son Marcus. They're at home. I need to let them know I'm okay." "What's their phone number?" Beth asked, pulling out her cell phone. "I'll call them and explain what happened." Matthew provided Hannah's cell phone number, though he was clearly struggling to remember details through his exhaustion and disorientation. The paramedics were ready to transport him, but he seemed reluctant to leave without ensuring his children were informed about the situation. "Tell them I'm okay," Matthew insisted as the paramedics lifted the gurney. "Tell them this is just exhaustion, nothing serious. I don't want them to worry." Beth Thomas nodded, understanding that Matthew's primary concern was protecting his children from unnecessary anxiety. She watched as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, noting the genuine care and professionalism with which they treated their patient. As the ambulance pulled away from the hangar with lights flashing but no siren, Beth stood in the maintenance office looking at the scattered paperwork that had fallen when Matthew collapsed. Austin Reed was gathering the documents, ensuring that nothing was lost or damaged. "He's one of the best mechanics I've ever worked with," Austin said quietly. "He's been pushing himself too hard for months, working every available shift to support his family." Beth Thomas picked up one of the forms Matthew had been completing, noting the precise handwriting and meticulous attention to detail, even while exhausted. The quality of his work never wavered, even when his body was failing from the demands he placed on it. "Austin, what do you know about his family situation?" she asked. "He's been raising his 2 teenagers alone since his wife died a couple of years ago. Medical bills from her cancer treatment left them in serious financial trouble. He works as many hours as possible to keep up with expenses and save money for his kids' futures." The information confirmed what Beth had suspected from observing Matthew throughout the day. His dedication wasn't just professional pride, it was driven by necessity and love for his family. She understood now why he had pushed himself to the point of collapse. "I'm going to call his daughter," Beth said, dialing the number Matthew had provided. "She needs to know what happened and that he's being taken care of." As she waited for Anna to answer the phone, Beth Thomas was already forming plans that would go far beyond simple concern for a skilled technician who had collapsed from exhaustion. What she had witnessed that day was more than technical expertise. It was character, dedication, and the kind of work ethic that deserved recognition and reward. The phone rang 3 times before Hannah Coleman answered, her voice carrying the casual tone of a teenager expecting a routine call from a friend. "Hello? Hannah, this is Beth Thomas. Your father asked me to call you. He's been taken to the hospital, but I want you to know right away that he's going to be fine." The silence that followed lasted several seconds before Hannah's voice returned, tight with fear. "What happened? Is he hurt? Which hospital?" He collapsed from exhaustion at work after completing a very demanding aircraft repair. The paramedics said his vital signs are good, and it appears to be severe fatigue rather than anything more serious. They've taken him to Riverside Community Hospital for evaluation and treatment. Beth could hear Hannah's sharp intake of breath, followed by muffled conversation as she apparently shared the news with her younger brother. The fear in the teenager's voice was heartbreaking, reminding Beth that these children had already lost one parent and were terrified of losing another. "We need to get to the hospital," Hannah said, her voice shaking slightly. "But we don't have a car, and I don't have money for a taxi. Can you tell me exactly what the doctors said?" The practical concern in Hannah's voice, mixed with her obvious worry, painted a clear picture of a family operating without safety nets. Beth Thomas found herself making a decision that went beyond simple courtesy. "Hannah, I'm going to come pick you up and take you to the hospital. Where do you live?" "You don't have to do that. We can figure something out. I want to help. Your father did exceptional work on my aircraft today, and I could see how much he cares about you and your brother. Please, let me drive you to see him." After getting the address, Beth left the airport and drove through the older residential section of Westmont, where the Coleman family lived. The apartment complex was well maintained but clearly budget housing, the kind of place where working families lived when money was tight, but pride remained intact. Hannah and Marcus Jr. were waiting outside their building when Beth arrived. Hannah was 16, tall and serious-looking, with her father's intelligent eyes and an air of responsibility that seemed beyond her years. Marcus Jr., 14, was smaller and more obviously worried, fidgeting with a basketball he carried everywhere. "Are you sure Dad's okay?" Marcus asked as soon as he got in the car. "He's been working so much lately. We hardly see him except when he comes home exhausted." "The paramedics were very reassuring," Beth replied, pulling away from the apartment. "Complex. They said it looked like exhaustion and dehydration, nothing that proper rest and medical attention can't fix." During the 20-minute drive to the hospital, Beth learned more about the Coleman family's situation. Hannah was a senior in high school with excellent grades, hoping to attend Kansas State University, but worried about tuition costs. Marcus Jr. was a good student and talented basketball player whose shoes were indeed worn beyond safe use for athletic activities. "Dad feels terrible that he can't afford to send me to college without student loans," Hannah said quietly. "He keeps talking about picking up extra shifts to save money for tuition, but he's already working himself to death." "What happened to your mother?" Beth asked gently, though Austin had already provided some details. "Cancer," Marcus Jr. answered simply. 2 years ago. The treatments didn't work, and the medical bills were huge. Dad sold our house and most of our stuff to pay the hospitals, but there's still debt he's working to pay off." The information confirmed everything Beth had suspected about Matthew's circumstances. A man working himself to exhaustion, not from greed or ambition, but from love and responsibility. The kind of situation that could be transformed with the right opportunity and resources. At Riverside Community Hospital, they found Matthew in the emergency department, awake and alert, but connected to an IV drip. His color had improved significantly, and he managed a weak smile when he saw his children approaching his bedside. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said, reaching out to take Hannah's hand. "The doctor says I just need rest and better nutrition. Nothing serious." Dr. Gregory Hughes, the emergency physician treating Matthew, was a competent professional in his late 30s who had seen many cases of work-related exhaustion. He approached the family with the kind of straightforward manner that inspired confidence. Mr. Coleman's test results showed dehydration, low blood sugar, and elevated stress hormones, consistent with chronic overwork, Dr. Hughes explained. "His heart and other organs are fine, but his body is telling him he needs to make some changes in his work schedule." "Doctor, I can't reduce my work hours," Matthew said firmly. "I have financial obligations and 2 children depending on me." Dr. Hughes had heard similar statements from many patients, particularly single parents, struggling to balance economic necessity with personal health. "Mr. Coleman, if you continue at this pace without adequate rest and nutrition, you're going to have more serious health problems. Your body can only handle so much stress before it breaks down completely." Beth Thomas had been listening to the conversation from a respectful distance, but she found herself stepping closer to the bedside. The medical advice was sound, but it didn't address the underlying economic pressures that drove Matthew's unsustainable work schedule. "Mr. Coleman, would it be all right if I spoke with you privately for a few minutes?" Beth asked. "There's something I'd like to discuss." Matthew looked puzzled, but nodded agreement. Hannah and Marcus Jr. stepped out into the hallway with Dr. Hughes to discuss their father's treatment plan, leaving Beth alone with Matthew in the emergency department cubicle. "Mr. Coleman, I haven't been entirely honest about who I am," Beth began, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "My name is Elizabeth Thornton, and I'm the CEO of Thornton Technologies. I was traveling under an assumed name for privacy reasons." Matthew's expression showed confusion mixed with concern. He had no idea why a technology company executive would reveal her identity to him, or what this might mean for his family. "I observed your work today very carefully," Elizabeth continued. "Not just your technical skills, which are extraordinary, but your character, your work ethic, and your dedication to doing things correctly, regardless of personal cost. I also learned about your family situation and the circumstances that drive you to work such demanding schedules. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not looking for charity, Matthew said quietly. I can take care of my family. This isn't charity, Mr. Coleman. This is business. Thornton Technologies has been developing plans for an aerospace division focused on aircraft safety and maintenance technology. We need someone with your expertise to lead the technical development and implementation of new maintenance protocols. Elizabeth paused, watching Matthew's reaction carefully. She could see that he was processing her words, but struggling to understand what she was proposing. I'm offering you a position as Director of Aviation Safety Technology, based in our Kansas City facility. The salary would be $120,000 annually, plus full benefits, education assistance for your children, and stock options in the company. The silence that followed was profound. Matthew stared at Elizabeth, trying to comprehend how his life could change so dramatically in the space of a single conversation. The salary she mentioned was nearly 3 times what he currently earned, enough to transform his family's circumstances completely. I don't understand, Matthew said finally. You don't know anything about me except what you observed today. How can you offer someone a job like that based on a few hours of watching them work? Mr. Coleman, I've been successful in business because I recognize exceptional talent when I see it. Today, I watched you solve complex technical problems under extreme pressure, maintain absolute professional standards despite personal exhaustion, and demonstrate leadership and teaching abilities that can't be learned from textbooks. Elizabeth moved closer to Matthew's bedside, her expression serious and sincere. More importantly, I saw your character. You pushed yourself to the point of collapse because you were determined to complete your work correctly and safely. You put the welfare of others ahead of your own comfort and health. Those are qualities that can't be taught or bought. But I'm just an aircraft mechanic. I don't have experience running technology development programs or managing large budgets. You have something more valuable than experience in corporate management. You have expertise in the field we're entering, and you understand the real-world applications of the technology we want to develop. You also have the kind of integrity and work ethic that makes other people want to follow your leadership. Matthew's mind was reeling with the implications of Elizabeth's offer. The salary alone would solve his family's financial problems and provide security he hadn't dared hope for, but the opportunity seemed almost too good to be real. Why aviation safety technology? He asked. There are many areas where technology companies can expand. Because aviation maintenance is critical to saving lives, and current systems aren't adequate for the complexity of modern aircraft. Today's repair process you completed would have been impossible without your specific expertise. We need to develop systems and protocols that can help other mechanics handle complex problems more efficiently and safely. The explanation resonated with Matthew's professional experience. He had encountered many situations where better diagnostic tools or more systematic approaches could have saved time and improved safety. The idea of helping develop such systems was professionally exciting. I would need to learn about business, management, corporate procedures, technology development processes, Matthew said, thinking through the challenges of such a career transition. We would provide complete training and support. You wouldn't be expected to manage business operations immediately. Initially, you would focus on technical development while learning corporate management skills. We have experienced business managers who would handle administrative functions while you concentrate on the technical aspects. Elizabeth could see that Matthew was seriously considering her offer, but she also recognized the overwhelm of someone whose life was being offered a complete transformation. She decided to give him space to process the opportunity. Mr. Coleman, I don't need an answer today. You need time to recover from your exhaustion and discuss this with your children. But I want you to know that this offer is genuine, and I believe You would be extraordinarily successful in this role." Hannah and Marcus Jr. returned to the cubicle, their faces showing relief that their father appeared to be recovering well. Dr. Hughes followed them, carrying discharge instructions and recommendations for Matthew's recovery. "Mr. Coleman, I'm releasing you with instructions for rest, proper nutrition, and a follow-up appointment with your primary care physician," Dr. Hughes said. "Most importantly, you need to address the work schedule that led to this exhaustion." Elizabeth stood to leave, giving the family privacy to discuss Matthew's medical care and recovery. But before departing, she placed her business card on the bedside table. "My personal contact information is on that card," she told Matthew. "When you're ready to discuss the position we talked about, please call me. There's no pressure and no time limit on the offer." As Elizabeth left the hospital, she reflected on the day's events and her decision to offer Matthew such a significant opportunity. Her success in business had been built on recognizing exceptional people and creating situations where their talents could flourish. Matthew Coleman represented exactly the kind of person she wanted, leading her company's expansion into aviation. Technology. The drive back to the airport gave Elizabeth time to consider the implementation details of her offer. Relocating Matthew and his family to Kansas City, providing corporate housing during the transition, arranging for the children's school transfers, developing a training program for Matthew's business skills. All manageable logistics for someone with her resources. What struck her most was Matthew's immediate concern about accepting help, his pride in providing for his family independently, and his genuine surprise that someone would recognize his value. These qualities convinced her that she had made the right decision in offering him the opportunity to transform not just his own life, but potentially the entire aviation maintenance industry. 3 days after his collapse, Matthew sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, staring at Elizabeth Thornton's business card while his children ate breakfast before school. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind of recovery, reflection, and research as he tried to process the extraordinary opportunity that had been presented to him. "Dad, you've been looking at that card for 3 days, Hannah observed, spreading peanut butter on toast with the careful precision that came from making a small jar last as long as possible. "Are you going to call her or not?" "It's not that simple, sweetheart," Matthew replied, turning the elegant business card over in his weathered hands. "This would change everything for our family. We'd have to move to Kansas City. You'd have to change schools in your senior year. Marcus would have to leave his basketball team." Marcus Jr. looked up from his cereal, his expression mixing excitement with apprehension. "Dad, Kansas City has great basketball programs, and if this job pays what she said, you wouldn't have to work 70 hours a week anymore. We'd actually get to see you." The comment hit Matthew harder than his son probably intended. The truth was that he had been working such long hours that he had missed most of his children's lives over the past 2 years. School events, basketball games, parent-teacher conferences beyond the required ones, simple family dinners together. "Have you researched this Thornton Technologies company?" Hannah asked, demonstrating the practical thinking that reminded Matthew so much of her mother. "We should know if this is legitimate before making any decisions." Matthew had indeed spent considerable time researching Elizabeth Thornton and her company. Thornton Technologies was a major player in industrial automation and safety systems, with annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. Elizabeth herself was featured regularly in business publications as one of the most successful female executives in the technology sector. "The company is very real and very successful," Matthew confirmed. "Elizabeth Thornton has a reputation for innovative thinking and treating employees well, but that doesn't make this situation any less overwhelming." What Matthew hadn't shared with his children was his own research into the salary and benefits Elizabeth had offered. The $120,000 annual salary was more than twice the median household income in Kansas. Combined with the education assistance, it would allow Hannah to attend any university she wanted without crushing student loans. The landline phone rang, interrupting their breakfast conversation. Matthew answered, expecting a call from work about another emergency repair situation. "Mr. Coleman, this is Vincent Ramirez. I heard about what happened at the airport. Are you feeling better?" Vincent had been Matthew's mentor during his early years in aviation maintenance, a respected technician who had taught Matthew much of what he knew about complex aircraft systems. Now retired, Vincent occasionally checked in with his former protege, especially when word traveled through the tight-knit aviation community about significant events. "I'm recovering well, Vincent. Thank you for calling. The doctor says I just need to pace myself better and get proper rest." "Matthew, I also heard something interesting from my contacts at the airport. Word is that some big-shot CEO offered you a high-level position after watching you work. Is that true?" The aviation maintenance community in Kansas was small enough that news traveled quickly, especially news as unusual as a billionaire CEO offering a job to a local mechanic. Matthew wasn't surprised that Vincent had heard about Elizabeth's offer. "It's true, but I'm still trying to decide what to do. It would mean a complete career change and relocating my family." "Matthew, in 40 years of aircraft maintenance, I've seen a lot of talented technicians. Most of them never get recognition beyond their immediate workplace. If someone with real influence has recognized your abilities, you need to seriously consider that opportunity." Vincent's perspective carried weight with Matthew. The older man had seen careers flourish and stagnate, had watched talented people remain trapped in circumstances that didn't reflect their capabilities. His endorsement of Elizabeth's offer was significant, but what if I'm not qualified for that kind of corporate responsibility? "I've never managed anything larger than a maintenance crew. Management skills can be learned, Matthew. Character and technical expertise can't be taught. If this woman is as successful as you say, she knows what she's looking for in people. Trust her judgment about your capabilities." After ending the call with Vincent, Matthew sat quietly for several minutes, weighing the counsel of someone whose opinion he deeply respected. Hannah and Marcus Jr. had been listening to the conversation, and both could see their father's internal struggle with the decision. "Dad, what are you afraid of?" Hannah asked directly. "This sounds like an amazing opportunity." Matthew considered his daughter's question carefully. His fears weren't simple or easily explained. Fear of failure in an unfamiliar environment. Fear of leaving the community and work he knew well. Fear that the opportunity was too good to be true, but underlying all of these was a deeper fear. "I'm afraid of not being good enough," he admitted quietly. "What if I take this job and can't live up to their expectations? What if I fail? And we end up worse off than we are now." Marcus Jr. reached across the table and touched his father's arm. "Dad, you've never failed at anything important. You kept our family together when Mom died. You work harder than anyone I know. If this lady thinks you can do the job, maybe you should believe her." The simple faith his 14-year-old son expressed in his abilities was both humbling and encouraging. Matthew realized that his children had more confidence in his capabilities than he did himself. That afternoon, Matthew made a decision that surprised him. Instead of calling Elizabeth Thornton immediately, he drove to the Westmont Regional Airport to discuss the situation with Veronica Gutierrez. As his supervisor for the past 8 years, she knew his work better than anyone and could provide perspective on whether such a career transition made sense. He found Veronica in her office, reviewing maintenance schedules and staffing assignments. The paperwork scattered across her desk reminded Matthew of the administrative responsibilities that would be part of any corporate management position. "Matt, good to see you looking better. How are you feeling?" Much better, thanks. Veronica, I need to ask your opinion about something confidential. Matthew explained Elizabeth's offer, watching his supervisor's expression change from curiosity to amazement as he detailed the position and compensation being offered. Veronica had worked in aviation maintenance management for 15 years and understood both the industry and Matthew's capabilities. Matt, this is an incredible opportunity, but you seem hesitant about it. I've never worked in corporate management. I don't know anything about technology development or business operations. What if I'm not qualified for this kind of responsibility? Veronica leaned back in her chair, studying Matthew with the analytical approach she applied to complex maintenance problems. Let me ask you something. When we had that emergency with the charter flight's engine failure last year, who did I call to handle the situation? You called me because the other mechanics couldn't diagnose the problem. Right. And when the FAA inspector came for our certification review, who did I assign to walk through our maintenance procedures with him? Me, because you said I understood the regulations better than anyone. And when we needed someone to train the new mechanics on complex aircraft systems, who taught those classes? Matthew began to see where Veronica was leading the conversation. I did. Matt, you've been doing management and leadership work for years. You just haven't had the title or the salary that reflects those responsibilities. This Elizabeth Thornton person recognized what I've known for a long time. You have the skills and character to succeed at a much higher level. The validation from someone who had observed his work daily for years carried tremendous weight. Veronica's assessment helped Matthew understand that his self-doubt might be preventing him from recognizing his own qualifications. But corporate management is different from shop floor leadership. The principles are the same: understanding complex systems, solving problems, leading people, maintaining safety standards. The environment might be different, but the core skills transfer. Veronica stood up and walked to the window overlooking the maintenance hangar where Matthew had worked for so many years. Matt, you've been putting your life on hold since Grace died, working yourself to exhaustion to pay bills and support your kids. This opportunity could give you back a life, not just financial security. What about the department here? You depend on my experience with the complex repairs. I'll miss having you here, but I won't let my needs hold back your opportunity. We'll figure out how to manage without you. Good people deserve chances to grow beyond their current circumstances. That evening, Matthew sat with his children at their small dining table, sharing takeout pizza that they could afford because he had worked overtime the previous week. The contrast between their current financial constraints and the opportunities Elizabeth's offer would provide was stark and undeniable. I've decided to call Elizabeth Thornton tomorrow, Matthew announced. If you're both willing to make this change, I think we should seriously explore this opportunity. Hannah's face lit up with excitement mixed with relief. Dad, this could solve so many problems. I could go to college without you working yourself to death to pay for it. And I could play basketball on a team with better facilities and coaching, Marcus Jr. added. Plus, we'd get to spend more time with you. Matthew felt a weight lifting from his shoulders as he made the commitment to pursue Elizabeth's offer. The decision represented more than just a job change. It was a choice to believe in himself and accept that his family deserved better circumstances than their current struggles provided. There will be challenges, Matthew warned his children. New city, new schools, new responsibilities for me. We'll need to support each other through the transition. We've gotten through harder things than this, Hannah said simply. When we lost Mom, we figured out how to be a family. This is just figuring out how to be a family with better opportunities. Later that evening, after his children had gone to bed, Matthew sat alone in his small living room, looking at Elizabeth Thornton's business card one final time. Tomorrow, he would make the phone call that would either launch his family toward a dramatically different future or confirm that some opportunities were too good to be real. But for the first time in 2 years, Matthew allowed himself to imagine A life where financial security wasn't a daily struggle, where his children's futures weren't limited by economic constraints, and where his own expertise and dedication were properly recognized and rewarded. The decision to call Elizabeth Thornton represented more than accepting a job offer. It was a choice to believe that his family deserved the kind of opportunities that had seemed impossible just a week earlier. As Matthew prepared for bed, he felt a cautious optimism that had been absent from his life since Grace's death. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of either the most significant transformation his family had ever experienced, or a lesson in the gap between extraordinary offers and practical reality. Either way, Matthew knew he had to find out which it would be. Matthew dialed Elizabeth Thornton's direct number at 9:30 a.m. on Thursday morning, after ensuring his children had left for school, and he had privacy for what might be the most important conversation of his professional life. His hands were steadier than they had been 3 days earlier, but his heart rate increased as the phone rang. Elizabeth Thornton speaking. "Ms. Thornton, this is Matthew Coleman. You asked me to call when I was ready to discuss the position. You offered. Mr. Coleman, I'm delighted to hear from you. How are you feeling? I've been concerned about your recovery since the hospital." The genuine warmth in her voice helped ease Matthew's nervousness. Despite her corporate success and wealth, Elizabeth spoke to him with the same respectful tone she had used when observing his aircraft repairs. "I'm feeling much better, thank you. I've had time to think about your offer, and I'd like to explore the possibility of accepting the position." "Excellent. I was hoping you would be interested. I have some additional details to share with you, and I'd like to discuss the transition process. Are you available to meet in person? I could fly back to Kansas this afternoon, or you could come to our headquarters in Kansas City if you prefer." Matthew was surprised by Elizabeth's flexibility and willingness to accommodate his schedule. Most corporate executives he had dealt with expected others to adjust to their availability. "I could drive to Kansas City if that would be more convenient for you. Actually, I think it would be beneficial for you to see our facilities and meet some of the team you would be working with. Would tomorrow work for you? I could arrange for you to tour our development laboratories and discuss the specific projects you would be leading." The conversation was moving faster than Matthew had expected, but Elizabeth's professional approach gave him confidence that this was a legitimate business opportunity rather than an impulsive gesture. "Tomorrow would work well. Should I bring anything specific?" "Just yourself and any questions you might have about the position or the company. I'll have our HR director prepare a complete compensation package for your review, and our facilities manager can show you housing options in the Kansas City area." After finalizing the meeting details, Matthew spent the rest of the day researching Kansas City and its suburbs, looking at school districts for Hannah and Marcus Jr., and trying to imagine his family's life in a larger metropolitan area. The prospect of leaving Westmont, the only home his children had ever known, was daunting, but the opportunities Elizabeth was offering seemed worth the disruption. The drive to Kansas City took 3 hours through flat Kansas farmland, giving Matthew time to prepare mentally for the interview and facility tour. Thornton Technologies was headquartered in a modern office complex in the suburb of Overland Park, its glass and steel architecture reflecting the company's position as a major technology developer. Elizabeth met Matthew in the executive lobby at 10 a.m., dressed in professional business attire but maintaining the approachable demeanor he remembered from their first meeting. She was accompanied by a woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Sandra Brooks, the Human Resources Director. "Mr. Coleman, welcome to Thornton Technologies. I hope the drive wasn't too difficult." "No problems at all. This is an impressive facility. Elizabeth led him through a tour of the company's research and development laboratories, explaining the various projects under development and how the proposed aviation safety division would fit into the overall corporate structure. The facilities were state-of-the-art, with equipment and resources that far exceeded anything Matthew had encountered in aviation maintenance. "This would be your primary workspace," Elizabeth said, opening the door to a spacious office with windows overlooking a courtyard. "We would also set up a technical laboratory where you could work with our engineers on prototype development and testing." The office was larger than Matthew's entire living room at home, equipped with a conference table, multiple computer workstations, and technical reference libraries. The contrast with his current work environment was striking. The aviation safety division would start with a team of 12 people, Elizabeth continued. 6 engineers with various specializations, 3 technicians with field experience, 2 business analysts, and an administrative coordinator. You would direct the technical development while working with our business team on market analysis and implementation strategies. Sandra Brooks provided detailed information about the compensation package, which exceeded even Elizabeth's initial offer. The salary was $125,000 annually, with performance bonuses that could add another $25,000. Health insurance was comprehensive, covering Matthew's entire family with minimal out-of-pocket costs. The Education Assistance Program would pay full tuition and fees for Hannah's college education and provide tutoring support for Marcus Jr. "We also provide relocation assistance," Sandra explained. "The company will pay all moving expenses and provide temporary housing for up to 6 months while you find a permanent residence. We have relationships with several excellent realtors who specialize in helping relocated executives find appropriate housing." Matthew was overwhelmed by the comprehensiveness of the support being offered. Every concern he had identified about the transition was being addressed with generous corporate resources. "What would my specific responsibilities be in the first year?" Matthew asked, trying to understand the practical aspects of the position. "Initially, you would focus on developing comprehensive maintenance protocols for complex aircraft systems," Elizabeth replied. "We want to create diagnostic systems that help maintenance technicians identify problems more quickly and accurately. Your field experience would be invaluable in designing practical solutions." The project aligned perfectly with problems Matthew had encountered throughout his career. Complex aircraft systems often required experienced technicians to diagnose issues that less experienced personnel couldn't identify. Systematic approaches to diagnosis and repair could improve both safety and efficiency. "We would also want you to develop training programs for aviation maintenance personnel," Elizabeth continued. "Your teaching abilities, which I observed with Austin Reed, could help establish industry-wide improvements in maintenance standards." After the facility tour and initial discussions, Elizabeth invited Matthew to lunch at an upscale restaurant near the corporate headquarters. The setting was elegant but comfortable, allowing for private conversation about the more personal aspects of the career transition. "Mr. Coleman, I want to be completely transparent about why I'm offering you this position," Elizabeth said once they were seated. "Thornton Technologies has been successful because we identify exceptional people and create opportunities for them to excel. What I observed at the airport convinced me that you have the rare combination of technical expertise, leadership ability, and personal character that makes for outstanding corporate executives. But I don't have experience in corporate management or technology development. Those skills can be learned. What can't be learned is the kind of integrity and work ethic you demonstrated under extremely challenging circumstances. You maintained absolute professional standards despite personal exhaustion and financial pressure. That kind of character is the foundation of effective leadership, Elizabeth paused to let her words register before continuing. I also believe that industry expertise is more valuable than generic management experience. You understand aviation maintenance from the ground up. You know what works and what doesn't, what safety issues matter most, and how to communicate with the people who actually perform the work. The lunch conversation revealed more about Elizabeth's business philosophy and her expectations for the aviation safety division. She wanted to develop products and services that would make real differences in aircraft safety, not just generate profits through marginal improvements to existing systems. How soon would you need me to start? Matthew asked, beginning to accept that this opportunity was both real and achievable. We're flexible on timing. I understand that relocating your family requires careful planning, especially with Hannah. In her senior year of high school, we could arrange for you to start in January, which would allow her to finish the fall semester in Westmont and begin the spring semester at a Kansas City school. The consideration for his children's educational continuity impressed Matthew. Most employers would expect him to adjust his family's needs to corporate timelines, but Elizabeth was accommodating the practical realities of his situation. There's one more thing I'd like to offer, Elizabeth said as they finished lunch. I'd like Hannah and Marcus Jr. to visit Kansas City this weekend to see the area and the schools they would potentially attend. The company will cover all travel and accommodation expenses, and I can arrange tours of several excellent high schools and middle schools. The offer to include his children in the decision-making process demonstrated Elizabeth's understanding that the family's acceptance of the relocation was crucial to Matthew's success in the position. That's very generous. They would appreciate the opportunity to see what their lives might be like here. During the drive back to Westmont, Matthew reflected on everything he had learned during his visit to Thornton Technologies. The position was more substantial and better supported than he had imagined. Elizabeth's commitment to his success seemed genuine, and the corporate culture appeared to value both excellence and personal integrity. That evening, Matthew sat with Hannah and Marcus Jr. at their kitchen table, sharing details about his visit to Kansas City and the specific terms of Elizabeth's offer. Both children listened with growing excitement as he described the facilities, the compensation package, and the educational opportunities available to them. "Dad, this sounds incredible," Hannah said. "With the education assistance, I could attend any university I want without worrying about the cost. And you wouldn't have to work yourself to exhaustion anymore. The basketball programs in Kansas City are supposed to be really competitive," Marcus Jr. added. "It might actually help my chances of getting a college scholarship." "Ms. Thornton wants both of you to visit Kansas City this weekend to see the schools and get a feel for the area. She's paying for everything, and we could look at neighborhoods where we might want to live." The children's enthusiasm was infectious, and Matthew found himself caught up in their excitement about the possibilities the move would create. For the first time since Grace's death, he was planning for opportunities rather than just surviving financial challenges. "When would we move?" Hannah asked practically. "After Christmas, so you could finish your fall semester here." "The spring semester in Kansas City would give you time to adjust before your final semester of high school." As they discussed the logistics of the potential move, Matthew realized that his children were ready for this change in ways that surprised him. They had been living with financial uncertainty and his exhausting work schedule for 2 years. The prospect of stability and better opportunities excited them more than the challenges of relocation worried them. "Dad, I think we should do this," Hannah said firmly. "This is the kind of opportunity Mom would have wanted for our family." The reference to Grace was both poignant and motivating. Matthew knew his wife would have encouraged him to pursue any opportunity that could provide better circumstances for their children's futures. Her memory was a source of strength rather than a reason to remain trapped in difficult circumstances. If the weekend visit goes well and you're both comfortable with the schools and the area, I'll accept Ms. Thornton's offer. The decision felt both momentous and natural. Elizabeth had presented an opportunity that addressed every major challenge the family faced while recognizing Matthew's professional capabilities in ways his current situation never could. The risks of change seemed minimal compared to the certainty of continued struggle if they remained in their current circumstances. The weekend visit to Kansas City exceeded every expectation Matthew and his children had formed about their potential new life. Elizabeth had arranged for them to stay at a comfortable hotel near the Thornton Technologies headquarters, with a rental car for exploring the metropolitan area and visiting schools that Hannah and Marcus Jr. might attend. Their first stop Saturday morning was Westfield High School, a large suburban school with excellent academic programs and extensive extracurricular activities. The principal, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, personally conducted their tour, explaining the advanced placement courses, college preparation programs, and support services available to students. We have students from many different backgrounds, including several families who have relocated here for corporate positions, Dr. Martinez explained to Hannah as they walked through the modern science laboratories. Our guidance counselors are experienced in helping transfer students adjust academically and socially. Hannah was impressed by the school's resources, particularly the College Counseling Center, where students received individual attention for university applications and scholarship opportunities. The contrast with her current school's limited guidance services was dramatic. The debate team and academic clubs are very active here, Dr. Martinez continued. We also have strong partnerships with local universities for dual enrollment classes, allowing qualified students to earn college credits during their senior year. Marcus Jr.'s visit to Roosevelt Middle School was equally positive. The athletic facilities were impressive, with a full gymnasium, weight training room, and outdoor courts for basketball practice. Coach Williams, the boys' basketball coach, spent 30 minutes discussing the program and its emphasis on both athletic development and academic achievement. We've had several players receive high school scholarships and eventually college opportunities, Coach Williams explained. But we're just as proud of our players who excel in the classroom. Education comes first, athletics second. The philosophy aligned perfectly with Matthew's values about balancing sports participation with academic priorities. Marcus Jr. was excited about the possibility of playing on a team with better coaching and more competitive opponents. Sunday morning, Elizabeth met them for breakfast at their hotel, eager to hear about their school visits and answer any remaining questions about the relocation process. The schools are incredible, Hannah reported enthusiastically. The college preparation programs are so much better than what's available in Westmont. I could actually take advanced placement classes that would transfer to universities. And the basketball program looks amazing, Marcus Jr. added. Coach Williams said they practice year-round and compete in tournaments throughout the region. Elizabeth smiled at their enthusiasm, remembering her own children's excitement when they had moved to better school districts years earlier. I'm glad you're pleased with the educational opportunities. What about the area in general? Did you get a chance to explore the neighborhoods? Matthew had spent Saturday afternoon driving through several residential areas that Sandra Brooks had recommended as appropriate for their family. The suburban communities offered a combination of good schools, safe neighborhoods, and reasonable home prices that made relocation practical even on their current budget. We looked at houses in 3 different areas, Matthew replied. The neighborhoods are much nicer than what we could afford in Westmont, and the housing costs are reasonable. With the salary you're offering, we could actually buy a house instead of renting. The prospect of home ownership had seemed impossible during the past 2 years of financial struggle. Matthew's credit had recovered from the medical debt crisis, but saving for a down payment while working to meet monthly expenses had been unrealistic. Elizabeth's compensation package would change that completely. Thornton Technologies has relationships with several mortgage companies that offer favorable terms to our employees, Elizabeth mentioned. We can also provide assistance with down payment funds as part of the relocation package. After breakfast, Elizabeth drove them to the Thornton Technologies facility for a more detailed tour of the areas where Matthew would be working. The Aviation Safety Laboratory was being constructed specifically for his program, with equipment for testing diagnostic systems and space for training personnel. This is where you would work with our engineering team to develop new maintenance protocols, Elizabeth explained, showing Matthew the planned layout for testing aircraft components. We're investing significantly in this program because we believe it has tremendous potential for improving aviation safety industry-wide. The scope of the investment impressed Matthew. Elizabeth wasn't offering him a token position or experimental program. She was committing substantial corporate resources to developing aviation safety technology, with his expertise as the foundation for the entire division. When would the laboratory be completed? Matthew asked, examining the architectural plans and equipment specifications. Construction should be finished by February. That would give you time to complete your relocation and begin assembling your team. We've already identified several promising candidates for the engineering positions, pending your approval of their qualifications. The timeline aligned perfectly with Matthew's family needs. Hannah could complete her fall semester in Westmont. They could move during the Christmas break, and he could begin his new position with adequate time for preparation and team building. That afternoon, Elizabeth introduced Matthew to Dr. Patricia Wells, the company's research and development director, who would be his immediate supervisor during the transition period. Dr. Wells was an experienced executive with a background in both engineering and business management. Mr. Coleman, I'm excited about working with you on this project, Dr. Wells said during their meeting. Elizabeth has explained your background and the vision for the Aviation Safety Division. I think you'll find our corporate culture very supportive of innovation and practical problem solving. The conversation covered Matthew's initial responsibilities, the training programs available to help him develop business management skills, and the support staff who would handle administrative functions while he focused on technical development. We don't expect you to become a corporate executive overnight, Dr. Wells assured him. You'll have time to learn our systems and procedures while contributing your technical expertise to the development projects. The approach eliminated most of Matthew's concerns about being unprepared for corporate responsibilities. Thornton Technologies seemed committed to providing the support and training necessary for his success, rather than expecting him to figure everything out independently. Monday morning, before driving back to Westmont, Matthew met with Sandra Brooks to finalize the employment contract and discuss relocation logistics. The paperwork was comprehensive but clearly written, outlining his responsibilities, compensation, benefits, and the company's commitments for supporting his transition. The contract includes a 3-year initial term with options for extension, Sandra explained. This provides security for your family while allowing both you and the company to evaluate the success of the arrangement. The job security was important to Matthew, who had been living with the uncertainty of hourly employment and the constant possibility of reduced work availability. A 3-year contract provided the stability necessary for making long-term decisions. About housing, his children's education, and family planning. We'll handle all the logistics of your move, Sandra continued. Professional movers, temporary housing if you need it, school enrollment assistance for your children, and connections, with realtors who understand corporate relocations. The comprehensive support package addressed every practical concern Matthew had identified about the move. Elizabeth had apparently anticipated the challenges involved in relocating a family and committed corporate resources to ensure a smooth transition. During the drive back to Westmont, Matthew and his children discussed everything they had learned during the weekend visit. The unanimous conclusion was that the opportunity exceeded their expectations in every important category. "Dad, I can't believe how much better the schools are," Hannah said from the passenger seat. "The college counseling alone would make the move worthwhile. I could actually get help with university applications and scholarship searches. The basketball facilities were incredible," Marcus Jr. added from the back seat. "And Coach Williams said they have connections with high school coaches who help players get college scholarships." Matthew felt a profound sense of relief as he listened to his children's excitement about their potential new life. The move would disrupt their current routines and social connections, but the opportunities available in Kansas City far outweighed the temporary inconveniences of relocation. "Are you both ready to make this change?" Matthew asked, wanting to ensure they were committed to the decision rather than just excited about the possibilities. "Dad, we've been ready for a change since Mom died," Hannah replied seriously. "We've been stuck in survival mode for 2 years. This gives us a chance to actually live again instead of just getting by." The mature perspective his 16-year-old daughter expressed reminded Matthew of how much his children had grown during their family's financial struggles. They understood the difference between their current limitations and the opportunities Elizabeth was offering. That evening, Matthew called Elizabeth to formally accept her offer and confirm his starting date of January 15th. The conversation was brief but significant, marking the official beginning of his family's transformation from financial struggle to professional opportunity. "Mr. Coleman, I'm delighted that you're joining our team," Elizabeth said. "I'm confident that this will be beneficial for both you and Thornton Technologies. We're looking forward to the innovations you'll bring to aviation safety." After ending the call, Matthew sat in his small living room looking around at the apartment that had been their home during the most difficult period of their lives. In 6 weeks, they would be living in a larger house in a better neighborhood, with financial security and educational opportunities that had seemed impossible just 2 weeks earlier. The transformation felt almost surreal, but it was grounded in Elizabeth's recognition of his professional capabilities and her commitment to creating opportunities for exceptional people. Matthew had worked hard to develop his expertise and maintain his integrity despite challenging circumstances. Now those qualities were being rewarded in ways that would benefit his entire family. As he prepared for bed, Matthew reflected on the series of events that had led from his collapse in the airport hangar to this life-changing opportunity. Elizabeth's presence during the aircraft repair had been coincidental, but her decision to offer him the position was based on careful observation of his character and capabilities. The next 6 weeks would involve completing his responsibilities at Westmont Regional Airport, preparing his children for the move, and organizing the practical details of relocating their lives to Kansas City. But the most difficult decisions had been made, and the future looked brighter than it had since Grace's death. 6 months after starting his position at Thornton Technologies, Matthew stood in his spacious office overlooking the Kansas City skyline, reviewing progress reports from his aviation safety development team. The transformation in his professional life had been remarkable, but the changes in his family's circumstances were even more profound. Hannah had not only adjusted to her new high school, but was thriving academically in ways that wouldn't have been possible in Westmont. Her advanced placement courses were challenging but manageable with the school's excellent support systems, and her college applications had been submitted to universities that had seemed financially impossible just months earlier. "Dad, I got accepted to Kansas State with a partial academic scholarship," Hannah announced, bursting into his office during a weekend visit to the Thornton Technologies facility. "The admission counselor said my essay about our family's resilience after Mom's death was particularly compelling." Matthew felt a surge of pride and relief. Hannah's academic achievements had always been limited by their financial constraints and the resources available at her previous school. The move to Kansas City had allowed her talents to flourish in an environment that could properly support her potential. Marcus Jr. had experienced an equally positive transformation. His basketball skills had improved dramatically under professional coaching, and his academic performance had benefited from the middle school's emphasis on balancing athletics with educational achievement. Coach Williams says, "I have a real chance at earning a high school scholarship if I keep improving," Marcus Jr. reported during one of their regular father-son dinners. "But he also says I need to maintain my grades because college scouts look at academics as much as basketball ability." The emphasis on academic achievement alongside athletic development aligned perfectly with Matthew's values. His son was learning that excellence in one area didn't excuse mediocrity in others, a lesson that would serve him well regardless of his eventual career path. The house they had purchased in Overland Park had become a true home in ways their cramped apartment never could. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a backyard where they could host barbecues for Matthew's new colleagues and his children's friends. The mortgage payments, while substantial, were manageable on Matthew's new salary, and they were building equity instead of paying rent. Matthew's professional development had progressed faster than anyone had anticipated. The Aviation Safety Division had successfully completed its first major project, developing diagnostic protocols that were being tested by maintenance facilities across the country. The results exceeded expectations, with participating facilities reporting significant improvements in repair efficiency and safety compliance. "Matthew, the preliminary results from the beta testing program are exceptional," Dr. Patricia Wells reported during their weekly team meeting. "Maintenance times have decreased by an average of 30%, while diagnostic accuracy has improved by over 40%. The success of the diagnostic protocols had attracted attention from major airlines and aircraft manufacturers. Elizabeth had been fielding inquiries from industry leaders who wanted to license the technology or partner with Thornton Technologies on expanded development projects. "We're getting requests for presentations at 3 major aviation conferences," Elizabeth informed Matthew during one of their monthly progress reviews. "The industry is taking notice of what your team has accomplished." The professional recognition was gratifying, but Matthew was most proud of the practical impact their work was having on aviation safety. Maintenance technicians at facilities using their protocols were identifying problems more quickly and accurately, reducing the likelihood of in-flight emergencies caused by undetected mechanical issues. Austin Reed had visited Kansas City twice to observe the development work and provide feedback on the practical applications of the new diagnostic systems. His perspective as a working mechanic helped ensure that the technology remained grounded in real-world maintenance environments. Matt, what you've created here is going to change how aircraft maintenance is performed industry-wide, Austin observed. During his most recent visit, the diagnostic protocols eliminate a lot of the guesswork that leads to missed problems or unnecessary repairs. The validation from his former colleague meant more to Matthew than corporate recognition or industry awards. Austin understood the practical challenges of aircraft maintenance and could evaluate the real value of the innovations Matthew's team was developing. Vincent Ramirez had also visited the Thornton Technologies facility, bringing with him several other experienced aviation maintenance professionals who wanted to see the diagnostic systems in operation. Their feedback had been instrumental in refining the protocols for broader industry adoption. Matthew, in 40 years of aircraft maintenance, I've never seen technology that addresses practical problems as effectively as what you've developed here, Vincent said during the facility tour. This is the kind of innovation the industry has needed for decades. The endorsement from his mentor carried special significance. Vincent had seen countless technological developments that promised to revolutionize aviation maintenance, but failed to deliver practical benefits. His assessment that Matthew's work represented genuine progress validated the direction of the entire program. Elizabeth had been monitoring the division's progress with satisfaction that went beyond financial success. The aviation safety program was generating revenue and attracting industry attention, but it was also fulfilling her vision of creating technology that made meaningful differences in people's lives. Matthew, I want to discuss the next phase of your career development, Elizabeth said during a private meeting in her executive office. The success of the aviation safety division has positioned you for broader responsibilities within Thornton Technologies. The conversation explored possibilities for Matthew's continued growth within the company. His success in leading the aviation division had demonstrated management capabilities that could be applied to other technology development programs. I'd like you to consider taking on oversight responsibility for our entire safety technology. A group, Elizabeth proposed. This would include aviation, industrial safety, and automotive safety divisions. You'd be managing a team of over 60 people and a development budget of $15 million annually. The scope of the opportunity was both exciting and intimidating. Matthew had successfully managed the 12-person aviation team, but overseeing multiple divisions would require additional business skills and broader technical knowledge. I'm interested, but I'd want to ensure that I can continue contributing to the aviation safety work, Matthew replied. That program still has tremendous potential for industry impact. Absolutely. You'd maintain direct involvement in aviation safety development while taking on strategic oversight of the broader safety technology group. We'd also provide additional management training and business development education. The promotion would come with a substantial salary increase and equity participation in Thornton Technologies. More importantly, it would position Matthew to influence safety technology development across multiple industries, expanding the impact of his work beyond aviation. As Matthew drove home that evening, he reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred in his family's life over the past year. The financial stress that had dominated their existence had been replaced by security and opportunity. His children were thriving in their new environment, pursuing goals that had seemed impossible when they lived in Westmont. The house was filled with the sounds of a normal family evening when he arrived. Hannah was on the phone with a college admission counselor discussing scholarship opportunities and course requirements. Marcus Jr. was in the backyard practicing basketball shots, his form improved by months of professional coaching. "Dad, dinner's almost ready," Hannah called from the kitchen, where she was preparing a meal that would have been a luxury during their apartment days. Marcus made the honor roll again, and Coach Williams wants to nominate him for the regional all-star team. The simple pleasure of having his children share good news, rather than worrying about family finances, represented a transformation that went beyond material improvements. Their conversations now focused on opportunities and achievements rather than limitations and concerns. After dinner, the three of them sat in their comfortable living room, discussing Hannah's college plans and Marcus Jr.'s high school preparation. The contrast with their previous living situation was stark, but more importantly, their relationships had deepened as financial stress had decreased. "Dad, do you ever miss working on aircraft directly?" Hannah asked during a quiet moment in their conversation. Matthew considered the question carefully. He did miss the hands-on satisfaction of solving complex mechanical problems, but his current work allowed him to influence aviation safety on a much broader scale. "I miss some aspects of direct maintenance work," he replied honestly. "But what I'm doing now has the potential to help thousands of maintenance technicians do their jobs more effectively and safely. The impact is much greater than what I could achieve working on individual aircraft. Plus, you're not exhausted all the time anymore," Marcus Jr. observed. "We actually get to spend time together as a family." The comment reminded Matthew of how his previous work schedule had prevented him from being the kind of father he wanted to be. Financial necessity had forced him to prioritize earning money over spending time with his children. Elizabeth's opportunity had given him back his role as an active, present parent. Later that evening, after his children had gone to bed, Matthew called Elizabeth to accept her offer of the expanded management position. The conversation was brief, but significant, marking another milestone in his professional development. "Elizabeth, I want to thank you again for recognizing my potential and giving me this opportunity," Matthew said before ending the call. "You've transformed not just my career, but my entire family's future. Matthew, you've exceeded every expectation I had when I offered you that first position. The success of the Aviation Safety Division is a testament to your capabilities and leadership. I'm looking forward to seeing what you accomplish with broader responsibilities." As Matthew prepared for bed in his comfortable home, surrounded by the security and opportunities that Elizabeth's offer had created, he thought about the series of events that had led to this transformation. His collapse from exhaustion in the airport hangar had seemed like a low point at the time, but it had become the catalyst for the most positive changes his family had ever experienced. The story that had begun with a struggling single father, working himself to exhaustion, had evolved into an account of professional recognition, family stability, and the power of exceptional people to create opportunities for others. Matthew's expertise and character had been recognized and rewarded, but more importantly, his children now had access to the kind of future their mother had dreamed of for them. The journey from financial desperation to professional success had taken less than a year, but the foundation for that transformation had been built through decades of developing expertise, maintaining integrity, and never giving up on his family's potential for a better life. Elizabeth Thornton had provided the opportunity, but Matthew Coleman had earned it through years of dedication to excellence in everything he did. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.